thank you. Do you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. And today I'm going to show another impact collisional process in the solar system and the effect of it. In particular, the impacts of small meteorites or meteoroid of about 1 millimeter or smaller on asteroids. This like sandblasting dust is basically breaking rocks on the surface of asteroids, producing regolith. Regolith is covering all asteroids that we have studied so far. We never find any evidence of no regolith on asteroids, so a bare rock, fully bare rock asteroid. Itokawa is close to it, as we will see, but it's not, has some regolith on the surface. Regolith is just unconsolidated debris on the surface of asteroids, as we know from the moon. And then I'm also going to talk about another process that can produce regolith. It's not related to collision, but it's a very gentle process. And this is the thermal cracking. So basically the big thermal differences between day and night on the asteroids can crack and break rocks on the surface of these bodies. So some of you have already seen this talk at some conferences, and now I changed some stuff here. So this is the list of the collaborators for this project, and we thank the ANR, which is the French National Research Agency that founded most of this work. So I'll give you some motivation for this study, then I'll talk about the information by impacts of collisional process, then the thermal shocks, and I'll show some implication of these results. For further information, we published a paper in April about this work, and we're working on new results. Clara Morel helped us on the data reduction for this new paper. I'm going to show something. So why we're interested in regoliths? Well, because basically all the physical information, well, most of the physical information such as spectroscopy, albedo, compositional studies and so on that we get from asteroids, it's from observation of their regolith. Here I give you some example of regolith. This is Vesta from the drone NASA space mission, and this is images of Eros on the left and Itokawa on the right from NASA near Jamaica and the JAXA Hayabusa mission. And these missions have shown extraordinary variability of regoliths, and they have some of them are also complex, like mixing of different compositions within, like the dark patches on Vesta. We'll hear more this afternoon about it. But most of the studies have been devoted to understand how the composition can be inferred from regolith studies, space weathering, and so forth. But not much has been devoted to study how regolith is formed, is produced on asteroids. And so a regolith is produced on asteroids. We think the regolith is produced on asteroids, likewise on the moon. So here we see this cartoon from Quartz. It shows basically an asteroid can hit the moon here, penetrate some regolith, could be already present, get on the bedrock, underlying bedrock, and so the debris from the ejecta from this impact and launch come back on the surface, and these are boulders and blocks that are usually quite kind of big. And micrometeorites here, they come down to the moon, they impact the moon, and they comminute, so they break these boulders in smaller grains. We think that asteroids regolith is producing similarly well. And how long does it take? So basically, Hart et al. They have done a Monte Carlo simulation, and now it should be updated a little bit. But anyway, so they did the Monte Carlo simulation and calculated what is the rock survival time on the moon. And so here you see the time it takes to break a rock, and it's function of the rock diameter in centimeters. And you see it's between the 2 and 20 million of years it takes to break a rock between 1 and 10, 20 centimeters.
Excuse me, but then on the main bed should be enormously shorter, is that right?
No, it's longer.
Longer, right?
Yeah, and I'll show you why. So this we're going to So in order to okay, so what we did is basically we wanted to extrapolate this process to asteroids, and we did this in the following way. So basically, the source of impactors that break this rock are basically sub-millimeter, 100 micron, or a little bigger projectiles that comes from the dust cloud. And the zodiacal dust cloud that is enshrouding our solar system, the inner solar system, is we can get the orbital information from these dust particles from different zodiacal light cloud models. One is, for example, from David and Zvorny. There's a series of papers by David and Zvorny et al. And here you see a sketch. So this is the sun. This is the heliocentric distance from the sun, from 1 to 5 AU. And these models shows that most of the zodiacal particles in this size range are produced by the disruption of Jupiter family comet, about 5 AU. And so here you see this is the plane of the solar system, so this is the inclination, and this is the distance. And so basically the orbit of this dust particle, they decrease as they spiral in towards the sun because of the Poynting Robertson drag. So you can see that basically the inclination of the orbit is conserved, but the orbital same major axis decreases with time. And since here the source is kind of constant, you basically increase, because of this process, the particle number density per unit volume. So you have more particle here than here per, let's say, kilometer cube, sorry. And so we basically did a simulation of the impacts using a very simple code. We put a moon and a near-Earth asteroid here, 1U, that are represented both by this circle, and then a main belt here. And we calculated what is the probability of impact of any dust particle in the cloud with these two bodies. And it turns out that you have 10 times, the probability is 10 times higher here than here per, let's say, unit area per unit time. It means that here you have 10 times more collisions than here. You also have the dust particle from the asteroid here, which maybe this is what Andrea was thinking. But the velocity of impact is much slower of the dust in the region compared to this basically cometary dust that it impacts at between let's say between 13, 15, and 10 kilometers per second. The dust particles here from the asteroid impact at much lower speed, around 5 kilometers per second. So if you take this into account, basically you can say that for a near-Earth asteroid, the rock survival time is the same as on the moon, whereas on the main-Earth asteroid it's 10 times small. It's longer. So it takes 10 times more to break the rock on the asteroid in the main belt, but in the near-Earth asteroid is higher. It's like on the moon. Anyway, this process is quite slow. So it takes from 20 to about 200 millions of years to break a rock this size on main belt asteroid. There's another problem. So to make regulate, if you impact a main belt asteroid with an impactor, typically the ejecta velocities that we get from hypervelocity experiments go away with the velocity that is usually larger than a meter per second. Maybe you can get down to 80 centimeters per second. But it's very hard to go lower. And that's the typical escape velocity of a kilometer-sized asteroid. So basically, if you impact, it's hard to keep anything on the asteroid. The particles are gone. And so how do you make regulate in the first place? It works, but it's not very effective, the impact process. And so we thought about another process that is very well known to geophysicists and geologists on the Earth. This is the thermal cracking. So basically here you see this cartoon from McFadden et al. You see a rock in the morning that has this side warmed up by the sun, whereas the other side is very cold. And as the asteroid rotates, the sun moves in the sky, moves in the sky, and the thermal gradient in the afternoon is reversed to the thermal gradient in the morning. And basically you set up a differential, so you have a thermal gradient that is spatially and temporally variable, which causes differential expansion and contraction of the rock, which produce mechanical stresses. Even if the stresses are very low, you cannot break up the rock in one single, let's say, cycle. However, these stresses can be large enough to make fatigue. Fatigue is basically crack growth, and it is a, how do you say, it's like an internal damage of the rock. So as you cycle day and night, day and night, day and night, the cracks grow and the rocks become more and more damaged with time. So the fatigue is very well known in engineering, like planes, and there was a famous plane accident because of mechanical fatigue in the early, in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. The Havilland comet crashed because of mechanical fatigue. So to understand if this effect works on asteroids, we basically took two meteorites, samples, a Murchison meteorite, which is analog of C-type asteroids, we think, and a Northern Contrai, which is analog of S-type asteroids. And we cycled them with temperature that are here time temperature. So the pink and red curve are simulated temperature on asteroids, and the blue curve is what we need in the lab. So it's very similar temperature excursion. We did about 400 cycles, temperature cycles, but on asteroids they can go to millions or billions of cycles. So this is our protocol for the experiment. So before, midway, and after the thermal cycling, we took away the sample from the chamber where we did the thermal cycling, and we scanned them with a tomographer, X-ray tomographer, to see inside, to see the crack inside. And as we look at some cracks here, you see the crack that is about, maybe is about 20 microns, maybe a little more, 30 microns in, okay, thanks, in width. This is before, this is after, after 1 week, and this is after 1 month of cycling. So you see that the crack increases basically in widens. Some of the crack also increases in length. We also produce some regolith. So here you see some pieces, some chips fell off the Murchison meteorite due to thermal cycling. Nothing happened to Sahara, so the ornamental time we didn't see any macroscopic regolith produced. But we saw a crack growing in both meteorites. Not every crack grows, but the average grows. So here you see the crack length change in percentage as a function of thermal cycles. You see it's about 6% crack growth in Murchison and a little lower on the Sahara, about half. But then we developed a thermomechanical model to extrapolate our results to the lifetime of rocks on asteroids. And first of all, we used the thermomechanical model to predict our laboratory experiments. There's no fit, so the two approaches are completely independent, so the model and the experiments. But we see a good, kind of good agreement, both parts. Okay, so this is the crack length in millimeter, and this is the number of cycles. And when we extrapolated to much longer cycles, then you basically see the crack growing, very gentle, and then when you reach this there's like the fatigue goes to another regime where you have basically the crack will grow to a length that is compatible to the size of the body, and so you basically catastrophically break it. This plot captures the whole thing. So basically you see to the so here we plot the survival time of rocks on asteroids for oleogenous chondrite to the left in red, and to carbonaceous chondrite blue to the right. Top plots are for main belt asteroids, top plots are for near Earth asteroids, bottom are for main belt asteroids. The straight line is the horse line, moved to the calculated for asteroids with a model of cycle light cloud impacts and so on, and I explained before. The symbol is the thermal cracking. So you see that in general thermal cracking is slightly faster than the micrometeorite bombardment. Not always. Here we have similar values. So therefore we conclude that thermal cracking is viable unit to make the hydraulic on asteroids. I'll show you some new experiments. I'm sorry for the quality of the clock, the picture is not great, but we did new experiments of thermal fatigue where we actually did the thermal cycling at a faster rate. And we do not only produce cracked rods, but we enucleated new cracks. Or at least we think that they are nuclear cracks because we see nothing at the resolution of the scanning electron microscope, which was about a micron here. And so after cycling this Murchison, we see a net of cracks that's set up in the meter. This is Allende, which is a Neanderthal carbonaceous chondrite, a CD chondrite that is has very different thermomechanical properties than the previous one, although they're both carbonaceous chondrite. And here you see after 1,600 cycles, your crack appearing. Some of them are going around the chondrules and so forth. The surprise is this. This is another carbonaceous chondrite. It's a Northwest African 801 that is a CR2 chondrite. We did nothing. So even if we cycle more than this, we desperately try to go to double this number of cycles. Nothing happened. So thermal fatigue didn't work on this object. We think that is maybe because of the quantity of metal ion in this object that makes it ductile, and so it's absorbed the strains without stresses. And I think I'll conclude with some implication. One is that maybe the hydrolyte could be a little younger than what we think. And indeed, the cracks, some of the grains from Itokawa brought back by Hayabusa has a relatively young age of a few million years from their exposure, cosmic ray exposure. And it's interesting, I don't know if Michael is going to talk about this tomorrow. Where's Michael? Are you going to talk about this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we think that if you go very close to the sun, in particular, and if you are an asteroid similar to a Murchison chondrite, the thermal fatigue can be so effective that you can basically erode the body. If the body is small, you can basically crack so fast, and then the radiation pressure can remove some of the hydrolyte, and basically you can probably destroy the object. More tomorrow by Michael Grandi. And I think I'll just leave with my conclusion. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Clemens.
Do you have an estimate of which mechanics is more significant in the breakup of rocks? Is it thermal stress or the impact of micrometeorites?
According to our effect is, I would say, thermal effects when we are close to the sun, like in the NEA, thermal fatigue is more efficient, and as you move to the main belt, it becomes less efficient. It's still maybe faster than micrometeorite in the inner main belt, but in the outer main belt and further away, the thermal fatigue is very, very inefficient. And then the mineralogy in mine matters. For example, you won't break a piece of metal iron, or for example, the CRs that have a lot of iron, like iron in metal state in the body, and we cannot break it. Yes.
Yes, as you know, we are interested in estimating the density of asteroids. And I wonder, these kind of effects are quite superficial, aren't they?
Yes, at the
So they
surface.
produce a layer of regolith which is very thin. So the effect on the density of asteroids should be small.
Yes.
So the problem is that for the only asteroid which we have been able recently in our case in 2014 to compute the density, which is Bennu, we got this terrific value of 45% empty space. So how do we get emptiness in the whole body?
I I don't care.
This must
because-
be different process.
Oh, yeah. Probably it's the formation mechanism of the asteroid, like Patrick Michel, where you have the breakup and then the body comes back.
Must be rubble pies. in some
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. Thermal fatigue only works at the surface. Absolutely. There's nothing going on in the. It's a few centimeters below the surface. There's no thermal effects. There's
So
no
what you're
thermal.
saying is that asteroids are made of blocks, and then you lower it and
Yeah.
weather the surface
Yeah.
and making a layer of
Yeah.
dust more or less.
Right.
But you must have big chunks of oil inside.
Yeah, absolutely. But
And this-
even the impacts, the micrometeorite impacts do not affect much the interior of the body.
you need a large impact.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Just a comment, there is some evidence coming also from polarimetry that if you plot some of the polarimetric parameters, the angle of inversion, the spin value or negative polarization in a plot, and you plot the values for bare rocks, very fine dust, and asteroids. The asteroids are intermediate, the occupated domain, which is intermediate between bare rocks and very fine dust. So this means that they are